The Miami Hurricanes defense bottled up USF's rushing attack, and that set the tone for a blowout Canes victory.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On another Victory Sunday, I am Alex Dono, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So much to break down after this 49-12 belt to behind session that Miami put on the Cinderella USF Bulls on Saturday night. As a result of that, and as a result of Miami improving their standing as one of the best teams in college football, College Game Day is coming to Coral Gables next week before the Hurricanes take on the Florida Gators. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about yet another freshman wide receiver breaking out. It's not the one who already broke out the first couple of weeks. Josh Moore, welcome to big time college football. Let's talk about the top performers and the top factors in Miami's 49-12 beatdown of the USF Bulls. It was not a perfect performance. There are things that we can nitpick. There was sloppiness at times, but let's start with the good. So one of the factors for the USF offense that everybody, myself included, was talking about all week was containing dual threat quarterback Byrum Brown, who entered this game against the Hurricanes as USF's leading rusher, a guy who can hurt you with his legs. He hurt Florida with his legs last week, hurt Boise State, hurt a lot of teams last year, not so much Miami last year or this year running the football, but you knew Miami would have to be prepared. And the Hurricanes held Byrum Brown. He did, hit some shots down the field as a passer, but as a rusher, Miami limits Brown to 2 yards on 13 rushing attempts, 2 yards. And I don't know if you had this one on your bingo card. I didn't. Carson Beck outrushed Byrum Brown. Miami's quarterback scored a rushing touchdown and ran for 28 yards on 6 carries, as opposed to Brown, who was kept out of the end zone, and Miami held him to 2 yards on 13 rushing attempts. That was something Corey Heatherman, talked a lot about Brown, Miami's defensive coordinator, did in the Monday press conference, and how the Hurricanes would have to be prepared for him. They were prepared for him. And this is another excellent spot on the Corey Heatherman resume, because we were talking about this last week when he was at Minnesota last year. And by the way, Minnesota probably misses him a little bit. They just lost to Cal last night. But when Heatherman was coordinating Minnesota's defense, they didn't allow any quarterback to have any sort of success on the ground against Minnesota last year. So Heatherman is continuing that trend now so far with the Miami Hurricanes. Miami's defense wasn't just bottling up Brown. Miami held USF to 40 rushing yards as a team. They were ready for that, mission accomplished. And, they also did force USF to play from behind a lot and be forced to take shots downfield. But, Miami set the tone early with their defense, and they were ready for everything USF threw at them on the ground. A couple of other stats that I like before we get to individual performers here on Miami's D. Hurricanes held the Bulls to 7 for 19 on third down. That's, a good defensive percentage, about 35% or so. So that really helped negate the tempo of USF's offense, which was another big factor for us leading into the game. If USF is picking up a lot of first downs, they run really, really fast. Their head coach, Alex Golish, who also calls their offensive plays, he's a tempo demon. And if you let them sustain drives, they're going to gas out your defense. You're not going to be able to make substitutes. They didn't sustain nearly enough drives to make that a factor. So Miami's defense was not getting gassed out. That was a big thing for the Canes. When it comes to individual performers on the D, we have to start with Miami's stud duo of defensive ends. Rueben Bain and Akeem Mesidor in this one. They wreak havoc again. Bain and Mezzi combined for 12 tackles, 6 apiece, top of the team, each of them. They combine for 1.5 tackles for loss, a half a sack, and a pass breakup. And of course, they were both excellent. You have to start with Bain. Rueben Bain was in the backfield constantly. And so far this season, Ruben's playing like a number 1 overall draft pick. And as usual, I think this has been the case all 3 games so far on the Pro Football Focus grades. Bain was Miami's highest graded defensive player for the 3rd straight week, 87.5. That's out of 100 for those PFF grades. Bain played 48 snaps in the game. And Akeem Mesidor graded right behind Hurricane Bain at an 86.8, second on Miami's defense, playing 47 snaps to Rueben Bain's 48. The two of them together, and I want to get too ahead of myself here, but if Miami is, blessed with that opportunity for a postseason run, if you can get into the college football playoff, maybe even win the ACC this year, because Clemson is not who we thought they were, although Florida State, of course, has looked a lot better, and Georgia Tech. Welcome to the party. They just upset Clemson yesterday. But if Miami is able to make the type of postseason run we're hoping for, being able to have edge rushers like them, and the defensive tackles are also playing really well, by the way. But Bain and Mesidor are going to be a nightmare for opposing offensive coordinators and opposing head coaches to scheme against. A couple of other shout outs on the defense. In Miami's secondary, I know they did allow a couple of explosive plays, but overall they were very good. And it was great seeing true freshman safety Bryce Fitzgerald, one of the many true freshmen playing well for this Hurricanes team. Fitzgerald grabs another interception, and it was in a big spot in this game. For the 2nd straight week, Fitzgerald already got 2 interceptions on the year. This is a guy who not only is a true freshman, but Fitzgerald wasn't even able to be here for spring football because Columbus is not one of those schools that lets you graduate early to enroll at your college. So he's only been on campus since, May, June, and Fitzgerald is playing like a veteran out there. Another safety that I really want to shout out for this one, who's played well and physical all season long, was Jacoby Thomas, the transfer from Tennessee. He puts the big hit on Byrum Brown in the second half to force a fumble on USF's 2nd turnover of the game. Fitzgerald interception was the first, and Chase Smith recovered that fumble. Shout out to Chase Smith at linebacker. He had an awesome game. He was 2nd on the team in tackles with 5. He added a pass breakup, the fumble recovery, and 2 quarterback hurries in the game. So, Miami's defense, again, I'm not going to say it was completely perfect because Byrum Brown, he found Chaz Nimrod for a couple of deep shots. The first of those was, an incredible play when he was flushed out of the pocket. It was a little bit like the play that CJ Carr made against Miami for the Notre Dame touchdown a couple of weeks ago, where he just kind of threw it up and Nimrod had separation, made a great catch. But, Miami's defense overall did really well. And of course, they hold the USF to 12 points. So you can't argue with the results. And also, it was key early in the game, when USF was able to generate a couple of explosive plays and get down the field a little bit, Miami's defense held them to field goals, right? The Hurricanes were up 14 to 3 when we had that long lightning delay. They were up 14 to 6 at one point. Like, holding that offense to field goals was big. USF's other score was a touchdown and a failed 2-point conversion, but Miami's defense did a great job, and they legitimately looked transformed this year under Corey Heatherman. But let's talk about the offense. I know he threw 2 interceptions, but there's a strong case to be made that Carson Beck had another sensational game. But in a lot of ways, it was the Mark Fletcher show. And yeah, we had another freshman receiver break out in this one. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. We're reviewing Miami's 49-12 beatdown of the USF Bulls, which is, another ranked win for Miami. Had a ranked win against Notre Dame to start the season. Bethune-Cookman obviously not ranked, and Miami takes out the Cinderella, right? USF coming off an upset against Boise State, and an upset win at Florida, and, Miami puts a stop to their great. Now, USF might still end up in the college football playoff as a G5 team because they have everything in front of them, but the Hurricanes passed their test with flying colors. Let's talk about Carson Beck and the offense. You want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Want to know how I have pep in my step after a late night and a very early morning? 5-Hour Energy. Caffeine just got a flavor upgrade. 5-Hour Energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. What I love most is how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost when you need it. Folks, I love the grape 5-Hour Energy shots. That's been my favorite flavor for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I enjoy it so much. And honestly, with 5-Hour, I love how fast it kicks in and that it's sugar free. So I don't have to worry about crashing later. Even with boring, flavorless coffee, it's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-Hour Energy shots. Get the favorites you love or be bold and try something new in store or online at 5hourenergy.com or on Amazon today. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. For your next listen, make sure you check out Locked On ACC. I co-host that show with Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. We got a lot to talk about in the ACC. Georgia Tech pulls off, we'll call it an upset, even though Kenton predicted it would happen. I said it could happen. I thought Clemson would win a close game, but Georgia Tech pulled it off. 55-yard field goal to beat Clemson. We'll talk about that. The Cal Golden Bears are like low-key good. They beat Minnesota last night. There's so much to talk to. Miami keeps rolling, of course, in the ACC. Make sure you check out Locked On ACC. Like this show, it's available free wherever you get your pods and available free on YouTube. All right, the Miami Hurricanes offense. And of course, you got 9 regular season games left. You're going to have different challenges. You're going to face some good defenses the rest of the year. But I give Shannon Dawson a lot of credit. And I give Miami wide receivers coach Kevin Beard a ton of credit. I think it was 8 different receivers who caught passes in the game yesterday. Seems like every week a different receiver is breaking out. We had a couple of them break out today. So KB is doing a great job. Shout out to him. Miami's offense right now has looked like a well-oiled machine. And if anyone was wondering, hey, can they sustain what they did last year when they had Cam Ward, but he's not there anymore. He's in the NFL. So far, Miami, they're not necessarily putting up the same prolific numbers. They don't have to because their defense is actually making stops. But when it comes to the efficiency and when it comes to the way Carson Beck is managing that offense, spreading the football around, the offensive line, I think, is a little bit better than it was last year. Like, Shannon Dawson has this thing absolutely rolling. And as far as Beck goes, he had 2 interceptions in the game. So there's that. His first 2 turnovers of the year, Miami's first 2 turnovers of the year. The interceptions didn't actually concern me as much as the amount of penalties Miami committed. So Miami, you had a bunch of false start penalties, a holding penalty or 2. Now, I know people are going to say this in the comments, and I'm not going to argue with you that, there was some gamesmanship on the USF side, and they finally got called for a delay of game when their defensive front was trying to incite Miami into false starts. I mean, they do a lot of shenanigans over there. I exposed their submarine fake injury play that they do for extra point. They actually never attempted an extra point against Miami, so we never saw the submarine fake injury play. But USF, they do some. They play a little fast and loose with the rules. There's a little gamesmanship there. But still, regardless of the circumstances, I thought 9 penalties for 69 yards was too much. Some of those penalties were legit sloppiness on the Miami side. It didn't cost them yesterday, but who knows? You commit 9+ penalties against Florida or Florida State or SMU on the road or Louisville. Like, you may not be as lucky to overcome that. So I think that's going to be an emphasis for Miami, is cleaning up on some of those miscues. But as far as like the interceptions go, I'm not saying I condone them. I do not condone interceptions. The first INT for Carson Beck, he forced one under pressure that he admitted he probably shouldn't have thrown it. Miami was going for like a game-killing touchdown. That was with under a minute to go in the first half. They were really trying to break the game open. Beck got a little bit too greedy. The second interception, I can't really put that one on Carson Beck. You kind of put that on the whole offense, or at least a couple of the different wide receivers. So the second interception, as you saw, maybe you didn't realize what he was going for there, but that football was actually attempted targeting Tony Johnson a little farther down the field. But Malachi Tony, who's got a 50-inch vert, didn't realize that ball wasn't for him. He tried to snag it out of the air. He tipped it, and that went for an interception. So that was not, straight up on the quarterback. That was kind of, you chalk that up to multiple different people on that one. But, I appreciate that despite Miami committing their first 2 turnovers of the year, Miami's defense played complementary football. Neither of Miami's 2 turnovers were turned into points by USF the other way. And after the second interception, I appreciated this. Beck talked about it last night. After his second INT, what did Beck and the offense do the next time they got the football? They responded with a 91-yard touchdown drive. So turnovers are bad, but how you respond from a turnover is everything. And Miami had the response to put the turnover behind them and go for 91 yards and a touchdown on the next drive. So for Carson Beck, despite the 2 INTs, he completes 82% of his passes, throws for 340 yards with 3 passing touchdowns and the rushing touchdown. So he accounted for 4 touchdowns on the day. Let's talk about some of his receivers, though. This was the breakout game for true freshman receiver Josh Moore. If you followed the excellent training camp that young man had, you knew it was just a matter of time. So Josh Moore, he catches 3 balls in the game for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those were the first 2 touchdowns of the game. So when Miami got the fast start that we were looking for, they were up 14-0 in the game. Josh Moore catches both of those. And on his second touchdown grab, the 38-yarder, he pulls the pass in right over a USF defender's helmet. That's the type of play that Josh Moore was making day after day on Greentree. So you're seeing what he does on the practice field is translating to Hard Rock Stadium and hopefully translates on the road when Miami doesn't leave the state of Florida till like November, whatever it is. But, your first road game is going to be in Tallahassee, which is like barely in Florida. We'll see if that translates. But Josh Moore had his breakout, and I was here for it because I know you guys know that Moore was one of the young players. I was hyping up Malachi Tony, rightfully so. I was hyping up Josh Moore all offseason. And he had kind of a quiet first 2 games. And I was starting to get messages from listeners who were like, Dono, were you telling us lies about this Josh Moore? Why were you hyping this guy up? Now maybe you understand why I was telling you how good Josh Moore was. He shows it. Moore actually turned in Miami's highest Pro Football Focus grade, not only on offense, but for the entire team at a 93.7, playing 20 offensive snaps. So safe to say Josh Moore had an impactful game. You know who else was impactful? Let me give you a couple more. Mark Fletcher Jr. was one of the best Canes on the field last night. 120 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. Nearly had a third touchdown. I think that they initially gave him the touchdown, then they marked it short on review. And Fletch, just when we were kind of starting to doubt if Miami was able to create explosive plays on the ground. And I know people are going to ask me, what happened to Jordan Lyle? He was supposed to be good to go. He warmed up. He didn't play. When it comes to injuries, Miami, great mysteries. I don't know why Jordan Lyle didn't play, but without having his services, I know fans were wondering, is Miami going to be able to break out long, explosive runs? And that's exactly what Fletch did when he started to break the game open with a 38-yard touchdown run. That made it 21-6 in the second quarter. And on that one play, Fletcher showed off both his power running through guys and his shiftiness, making tacklers miss in space on the same play. It's a really great highlight. And he also got a great block on that run by wide receiver Keelan Marion to help pave the way. There are few things that I enjoy more than seeing Miami break off explosive running plays when you have wide receivers. We saw JoJo Trader do it week 1 on an explosive running play. Keelan Marion does it last night. I love seeing those guys block. And again, shout out to Kevin Beard because he has them not only prepared to catch, he has his players prepared to block. And Keelan Marion, also had his best game as a receiver at Miami so far. 6 receptions for 81 yards, including a 36-yard grab. He had a nice little battle with one of USF's top defensive backs, James Chenault, and he was able to win that one-on-one and grab a nice explosive play from Miami. All right, let's talk about whether or not the Hurricanes went perfect on executing my keys to the game going in. So you come out of this one, and by the way, I'm still talking about last night in Coral Gables in that facility. They're already talking about, thinking about, and watching film on the Gator. That's what's going on there. So they're already focused on the next opponent, which, by the way, College Game Day is going to be in the house for that one. But I want to go over the keys that I had pregame against USF and whether Miami went perfect in executing all of those. You want to keep it locked right here. We're not done yet on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. Folks, we're certainly not done with Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you could turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And if you're watching this episode or listening to it first run, we're heading into the congested NFL Sunday slate, so there's a lot to look forward to. I've been playing Prize Picks, guys, since way back in 2021. I'm hooked on it because it's such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. I love checking projections like on Josh Allen, more or less than 270 passing yards, or Saquon Barkley, more or less than 1 rushing touchdown. And the best part, even if one of your picks misses, Prize Picks invented the flex play so you can still double your money. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Folks, we're also proudly brought to you by FanDuel. And yeah, it's Sunday. You know what we're doing today on the FanDuel app. NFL season, it's a beautiful thing. College football season, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however I like to bet. Player props, which I love. Building a same-game parlay or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen, and shout out to the everydayers. If you want to take your everydayer experience to the next level, click the link in the show description below and become a Locked On Canes insider. If you're in the insiders chat, you get text messages directly from my phone to yours, breaking news, recruiting scoops, my thoughts, good or bad, on what Miami's doing on the field. It was a lot of good last night, as you would expect. Try it free for 14 days. And then if you like it, you can opt in for $4.99 a month. Give you a lot of added value on there on the Locked On Canes insiders chat. So a 49-12 drubbing of the USF Bulls. Miami got that done Saturday night at Hard Rock Stadium. And then, the message, of course, from here on out, and Carson Beck talked about it, consistency. Here, a couple of the quotes that Beck had after the game. I was watching his post-game presser. He was asked about keeping the focus and the intensity week after week because, you take a little time to celebrate your hard work and a blowout victory, but before you know it, you're looking at a Florida Gators team. And I know what's going on in Florida. I watched DJ Lagway throw 5 interceptions last night. I know they lost in Baton Rouge, but I got mixed thoughts on it because Florida kept the game that close at LSU 20-10 despite 5 interceptions. Normally, you see your quarterback throw 5 interceptions, you're probably getting blown out. So I know Florida's having a bad start to the year. The only team that they beat was Long Island Iced Tea. They lost to USF, who Miami just beat. They just lost to LSU on the road, as people expected them to lose to third-ranked LSU on the road. But, Florida has talent. So far this season, they really haven't gotten out of their own way. So they can absolutely be dangerous at Hard Rock Stadium next week. So Miami needs to have the same sort of focus that they've had in these first 3 games. The consistency needs to be there. They know it. And Carson Beck said last night, our team does a really good job truly focusing week by week. Each opponent is a faceless opponent, he said. And he talked about, Coach Cristobal, he said, pushes us really hard. He says those Tuesday and Wednesday practices are hell, he said, but that's what gets them ready for Saturdays. He says it's hot down here, and in Miami we go, is what Carson Beck said. And Carson, of course, despite 2 interceptions last night, I thought was really, really good with his 340 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and rushing touchdown. And also, shout out to Emory Williams, who got into the game late because, Miami was destroying them. He led a touchdown drive, Emory. He completed a couple of nice balls. He also had a 10-yard not a touchdown, but a 10-yard run at an important time. And Emory Williams, when it comes to his intensity and just how sharp he is and how demonstrative he is on the field, he really does look like a different guy than he was, last season and, what we saw in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I know everyone really criticized him for that performance, and rightfully so. But I wanted to shout out Emory because I know he's working so hard. And he had one of those like improvisational kind of flip passes that you knew he learned that from Cam Ward. Like that was a Cam Ward special. He played behind Ward last year. So Emory, I'm sure, put that in his bag of tricks after he saw, his former QB1 doing that. So I want to shout out Emory Williams. And also Gerard Pringle, who for the second straight week, he gets into the game late, true freshman running back, and he scores another rushing touchdown. Pringle has got the explosiveness where I think the future is really going to be bright for him. Of course, this year, Miami's primary running back rotation, Mark Fletcher, Marty Brown, and, Jordan Lyle. Hopefully he's back this coming week because, you could probably use him against the Florida Gator. You could certainly use him against Florida State in a few weeks. So, Gerard Pringle is not good. Maybe he will break into that big rotation. We'll see. But this is a true freshman working his way up and doing a really good job. As far as like the keys to the game that I had for Miami heading in, how did they actually do on Saturday? First key to the game, winning the line of scrimmage. Check. Miami did that. Miami controlled the line on both sides. The offensive line graded out very well from a pass blocking standpoint, and I think from run blocking as well. A few too many penalties on the offensive line, but Miami definitely won at the line of scrimmage. And, Rueben Bain and Akeem Mesidor exhibit A and B on how Miami won at the line of scrimmage. So that was a big dub. Stopping the run. Check. Miami absolutely did that. They hold USF to 40 rushing yards, and they held Byrum Brown to 2. Starting fast was another key. Miami did that. They started fast with a 14-0 lead. And that made it a little less, concerning when after Miami had a 14-0 lead, then they had a 3-and-out after USF had a big play, kicked a couple of field goals. But that fast start, allowed Miami to keep control of the football game before they eventually broke the football game open. So the fast start was important. Miami got it. Dealing with USF's tempo. No, the Hurricanes did not allow USF to sustain success with their tempo and gas out your defense. Check. Miami accomplished that. We talked about, winning the turnover margin. Miami didn't do that. The turnover margin was even. USF had an interception and a lost fumble. Miami had 2 interceptions. So we said before the game, though, that it was USF who would need to win the turnover margin in order to win the game, while Miami didn't have to do that. If the turnover margin was even, Miami should win because they're, the better, more talented team. So Miami didn't win the turnover margin, but you consider that one a wash. I think the only objective that Miami didn't win in this one was keeping the penalties down. And, you know, there were some shenanigans on the USF side, but still, I thought 9 penalties, 69 yards was a little too sloppy. And, you know, you won this game despite that. Can you guarantee you beat Florida State, even Florida, SMU, Louisville? Pitt could be a tough game at the end of the year. Virginia Tech is a hot mess, by the way. I mean, I know Miami still needs to go to Blacksburg to play them, but Virginia Tech is like an abomination to football right now. You know, I don't know what kind of state they're going to be in a couple of months. Maybe they'll have an interim head coach and they're all focused to play for the other. I don't know. But, you know, right now they look like a mess. But you know who's not a mess? Our Miami Hurricanes. And we're so not a mess that College Game Day is coming to town to see your top 5 Hurricanes. Now, at the time I'm doing this show, we don't have the updated AP poll just yet. I imagine Miami is probably going to even move up from their number 5 spot. Now, Florida will come in unranked at 1 and 2, but it's Miami versus Florida. That means something. That's a rivalry, even if they don't play every single year. And bottom line, guys, Miami has been so good to start the season that's the type of game College Game Day wants to be down here, even if the opponent that they're facing might not be in the best form in the country. So they're going to be on campus Saturday morning. You know, the show starts at 9 a.m., but I think you have to like start lining up at like 3, 4 in the morning. So go to bed early on Friday night, go to Coral Gables, go to Miami's campus on Saturday and be ready to rock it out because, you know, the last time College Game Day was at Miami was 2017 before Miami blew out Notre Dame. And it seemed like the Game Day crew had a great time down here, and they're going to run it back. Florida Gators will be the opponent for that. So College Game Day is coming to town. Huge thank you to all the Locked On Canes everydayers. Make sure you smash the thumbs up button, subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. We're going to have a busy week of shows coming up because it's Gators week. You want to keep it locked right here on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.